Hi everyone, I'm Kristine Lebetter. I'm here today with Dr. Eva Klein, Professor of Psychiatry and Behavioral Neurosciences at McMaster University, as well as a professor at the DeGroote School of Business. Eva, thanks so much for being here with me today.
Oh, real pleasure.
So today we're going to talk about receiving feedback and the importance of receiving feedback and how to receive feedback. This is obviously something that's been going on for many, many years as organizations give annual reviews. What are your thoughts on those?
Well, organizations have been giving performance reviews for years and years and years, certainly since the time I was a VP of Human Resources, and it is one of the most dreaded things that managers have to do, and they try to do it as infrequently as possible. Now, organizations have known that it's so important to give employees feedback because it's one of the basic ways that you can grow as a person. Mm-hmm. So what they've done is they've focused on managers giving their employees better feedback, communicating better, being softer, being more empathic to the person they're giving feedback. It's what's called the push method of giving feedback. Mm-hmm. And it's certainly commendable, but it doesn't work so well. And the reason it doesn't work is because finally, feedback depends on the ability of the receiver to receive the feedback.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. And I think that that is so essential in terms of growing as a person, is to be able to receive feedback well.
So why is receiving feedback so important to someone's learning?
Well, because we all have blind spots, Kristine. We all have blind spots, and we don't really see ourselves very accurately. Mm-hmm. So, for example, right now, I'm looking at you, and you're doing a great job, but I can't see myself.
Right.
I can't see myself. I have no idea what I look like. So I'm not very self-aware, and that's why your impressions of me are so crucial to my being able to correct them and portray the kind of image that I want.
So what can people do to receive feedback from others? It's important that we get this feedback. How can we ask for it?
Well, it depends, really. It depends who you are. We can certainly ask for feedback by saying, well, what do you think of how I did? But it's so much better to be able to be, rather than vague, be specific.
Okay.
Kristine, could you tell me one thing that you think I could have improved in this interview?
Interesting.
So being very, very specific is important. The other important thing is when we receive feedback, it always hurts. It always hurts. And the more you can let the person who's giving you the feedback realize that you want to hear it, the more often they're going to be amenable to giving it to you.
Right.
So that's a very important thing. We're all defensive when we receive feedback.
Receiving feedback is something that we all ask for. You know, give me constructive criticism, but as soon as we hear it, we're like, no, that doesn't,
right.
That's not what I wanted to hear. So what are some tips about and challenges about receiving feedback, and what can folks do to better react in the moment?
Well, I think one of the things you touched upon, Kristine, is that we ask for feedback, but we don't really want it. And the person who's giving it knows that. What do you think about my dress, Kristine? Right? You hate it, but you're not going to say that, are you? Because you're not sure I really want to hear it, and I'm open to it, and on little trivial things it doesn't really matter. But in terms of big things, it can make a huge difference in your personal development. It's huge. So one of the things is we can help people out. We can say, can you give me one specific thing that you think I could do to improve? Don't be vague.
Okay.
Because it'll help you in terms of being able to incorporate the feedback, because you know what you're getting feedback on, versus you're too assertive.
Right.
Well, what does that mean? Does that mean I talk too loud? Does it mean that I sometimes take over conversations? Well, you don't really know. It's not very helpful. So if we can help a person give us feedback that we can use, that really helps.
Maybe more specific.
The other thing is expect to be hurt. Criticism always hurts, especially if it is criticism about something about our self-identity that we treasure. So, for example, I think of myself as a fair person. If you criticize that sense of fairness about me, that's going to hurt. If you tell me, you know, Eva, you're not so organized, I'll say, yeah, you're right, I'm not so organized. It doesn't hurt me because I don't really care if I'm organized or not. And it's not feedback that's that relevant to my self-image. Maybe I could be more organized, but it's not threatening the sense of who I am as a person.
Right. So when you're in that position where you're receiving feedback and it hits you, and you do feel threatened or shocked, or, you know, it just wasn't what you were expecting or what you want to hear, what are some tips for still listening anyways?
Well, I think the first thing is don't deny it. Don't deny it to the person, and try not to deny it to yourself. Don't just shut the door. Try to just remember what that person says. And the other thing is ask for specifics. Ask for specifics because you don't really know. So, for example, in my assertive example, if you said to me, oh, you're too assertive, Eva, you'd say, oh, really? Can you give me some examples of where that is and where it stands in my way? So be an information gatherer rather than defending yourself and trying to see whether the feedback is true or not. You have lots of time to be able to do that afterwards to see if it makes sense to you. And even if it does make sense to you and you're like that, do you really want to change?
Right.
You may not want to.
Right.
You don't have to be perfect, you know.
So what is your tips for who is giving you that feedback? Do you have any
Well,
thoughts on that?
Well, it always helps to get feedback from somebody you trust. It's much easier to receive because we know that person has our best interests at heart. Usually it's very hard for a person to be able to do that because friends don't like to criticize their friends.
Right.
On the other hand, criticism from a friend is a true act of love.
Right.
Because that friend is saying, I think you're a wonderful person, and I think this is the ways that you are messing yourself up, and I think you could do even better. Now, we sometimes hear the truth more from our enemies than we do for our friends, and we discount it saying, well, they're my enemy anyway, they have ulterior motives, they're trying to make me feel bad. But even feedback from an enemy may be very valuable, sometimes more valuable, as long as you take the time to evaluate it. Maybe it's meant just to make you feel bad about yourself, but maybe there's a kernel of truth in it. And if you can, and it's not easy to do, don't throw it away.
Right. So it's about taking time to, you know, listen to the feedback that you receive and spend some time self-reflecting in order to make tweaks and changes.
Right, exactly. But one of the things I just want to say, because I've seen people get feedback and they use it as a way to lower their self-esteem. So what they do is they feel so criticized by their feedback, they're not very compassionate with themselves. So there's something wrong with me. That kind of model, and that kind of model isn't very helpful because it's not very self-motivating. So if you can have a model when you have feedback and when you're receiving feedback that you're a work in progress. You're not perfect, you're always growing as a person. And so the feedback is interesting. It doesn't mean where you are is bad and that you have to self-flagellate yourself.
Right.
but it's a way of saying, hey, if I did this, maybe life would be better. Maybe I could get ahead a little more. So it's a very tricky line. Don't use it as a way to find out everything that's wrong with you.
Right.
But in the spirit of self-improvement rather than perfectionism.
Right. Well, I think it's a great conversation, and it's something very important and hard for us to do in all facets of our lives. So, Eva, thanks so much for sharing these tips. I really appreciate having you on the show.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Love talking about the topic.